understand. Are you using your device or is your device using you? Can you put it down? Can you turn it on?
If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. That's a great question. What is the long-term effect of too much information? One of the effects is the need to be first, not even to be true anymore. So what a responsibility you all have to tell the truth, not just to be first, but to tell the truth. We live in a society now where it's just first. Who cares? Get it out there. We don't care who it hurts. We don't care who we destroy. We don't care if it's true. Just say it. Sell it.
So that's Denzel Washington. And you know what? He's right. That's Denzel Washington basically explaining what I've been complaining about now for quite some time, which is what is actually being said by the news media. Is it fake news or is it lazy news? I seem to think it's the latter. What's happening is that journalists who we once used to rely on to go out and find the truth now are happy to accept whatever they're given, especially if it comes from government, in order, as Denzel says, to be first. What am I talking about? Okay, let's take the Skripals and now the new incident of so-called Novichok poisoning in and around Salisbury. When the incident happened with the Skripals, the first thing I said was, if you get a call to two drunks on a bench, a CID officer does not attend that call. Never. But the newspapers ran a story that basically said a detective sergeant at that, not even a DC, a detective constable in the CID, attended the call, and as the first responder, this individual was somehow contaminated. So they ran hero police officer, assists two people on a bench, gets contaminated. I'll tell you now, of 30 years in the police, you will never see a CID officer answer a 999 call to people sitting on a bench. That is uniform duty, PC uniform duty, police constable uniform duty, all day long. So the question is, how was the DC contaminated? Sorry, the detective sergeant contaminated? First thing I notice is not one interview with that detective sergeant from any journalist in the media. Why? Not one attempt to say what unit is that detective sergeant in. Okay? No attempt whatsoever. First thing. Second thing, the Skripals are taken to hospital. And we're meant to believe that within hours of two people on a bench, drunks or druggies as it was put, all of a sudden, normal medics in a normal NHS hospital start thinking about, could this be a nerve agent? Well, I'm going to tell you, all day long, if you bring somebody into a hospital, the last thing that medics think about is this a secret nerve agent that somebody's been contaminated with? So now, why am I mentioning this again? Because the latter incident proves exactly what I've been saying. You've now got two more people contaminated with seemingly the same Novichok agent. The same hospital had these two people brought to them on Saturday. It's taken the same hospital until Monday, if not Tuesday, to find out that it wasn't some kind of narcotic that these people were on, some kind of illegal drug that was contaminated, but that it's a nerve agent. So why is it that on a simple case of two people coming in on the first incident, the Skripals, they were so on the ball that they figured it was a nerve agent within hours, but after having all that experience of the Skripals, they don't know what it is till a good 48 hours afterwards. I smell a rat. Now, some of you are going to be saying, but the Skripals were Russians. Let me tell you something else. And even worse, some will say, well, Skripal was a Russian spy. Right, let me get something straight to you, having been in that intelligence game for 30 years. The everyday normal police officer, and definitely the normal medic in a hospital, will not have a clue who the Skripals were. Unless they had something on it that said, this guy is a Russian somehow, they wouldn't even know they were from Russia. So they've got people in their hospital who they don't know who they are. They have no idea that Skripal is an ex-GRU officer. Because that's not the sort of thing that normal people understand or normal people get to know. And I'll say something again. The normal police officer and even the most senior officer in the police station in Salisbury won't know that either. Now, this is where we come back to our detective sergeant. If he is in the special branch or something like that, and he was tasked with just keeping an eye on them in case of any dangers, then he might know what the problem is. Because he was in, and the reason why I say something like that is because the special branch in many areas are disbanded and they're now sort of counter-terrorism branches or something like that, depending on which police force you're in. But such an officer dealing with intelligence, and not even the general officer in counter-terrorism will know this. So such an officer dealing with intelligence might know this because he might be indoctrinated into this in order to help the Skripal, well, Sergei, not the female, if there was any problem. So what I'm saying to you is, nobody would have a clue who these people are. So nobody would jump to the position that it's a nerve agent, as is shown in this latest incident, when nobody jumps to the supposition that it's a nerve agent, even though only some months earlier, the whole of the town was locked down and this same hospital dealt with the people with the same symptoms. Do you see what I'm saying? So something is amiss. Now, I've got my views on what might well be amiss. But what has happened is we've been happy to run with the Russia perspective. And because we've been happy to run with Russia, we're now trying to make everything fit Russia. When, as an example, I only put it as an example, we could say this is actually a false flag operation by, let's say, the Ukrainians, who, by the way, will have had as much access to Novichok in the 1970s and 80s and 90s as would Russia. Why? Because the Ukraine, for those who don't know, was an integral part of the Soviet Union. And Novichok was designed in the Soviet Union, not in Russia alone, in the Soviet Union. Actually, the place where it was initially designed was in Kazakhstan. And then, I'm not saying anything secret here, because you can look it up and see. So before anybody tries saying that I'm giving away state secrets, I'm not. Inform yourself. And also in the Ukraine, they had establishments that were assisting to build such deadly weapons. Because the Ukraine was one of the bigger Soviet republics along with Russia. And by the way, just so you understand, there were 15 Soviet republics. So that means 13 other Soviet republics could well have access to Novichok. And all of these Soviet republics are now independent states. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Belarus, we can go on and on, right? So what I'm saying is, when people stand up and say Russia, first and foremost, it's inaccurate because Russia was not the Soviet Union. It was just one part of the Soviet Union. And in fact, throughout the Soviet Union, we should say, most of the leaders of the Soviet Union were actually not even Russians. So somebody like Stalin, example, was a Georgian. So we need to understand, and by the way, Georgia is its own state now, no longer part of the Soviet Union and not part of the Russian Federation. So this idea that only Russia had access to this Novichok is untrue. And also the fact that the West knows nothing about Novichok is just as untrue. Why? Because many of the scientists who dealt on these issues in the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union fell apart, and these scientists were poor and no longer employed, the West's intelligence officers grabbed up some of these people, and some of them travelled to the West, the United States, the United Kingdom, and various other places. Okay, because they were top-level scientists. They got paid out handsomely. You only need to look on the internet. I'm not telling you anything secret. Look on the internet. You will see that one of the guys who developed Novichok actually wrote a whole paper about Novichok in 1992, saying how you can develop that substance. So please, journalists, do your job. Actually investigate, and don't just take what you've been told as proof positive. I also note, nowhere as yet, unless I'm misinformed, have I heard the police, who, by the way, we need to understand again, a bit of misinformation, the police are the primary investigative agency involved in this, not the security service or anybody else. The police do the investigations on this. And in this case, because it's terrorism, I'll give him that, it is the counter-terrorism branch called SO15 at Scotland Yard. The pre-runner of that was the organisation I was part of. Okay? So, understand this. It's in the hands of the police to do the investigation. And as far as I know, up to this point now, no police officer said there is any evidence whatsoever against any particular country. I repeat that. As far as I know, up to this point, police have not said that any particular country has carried out this act, i.e. evidence. Very, very important. Because you see, in this country, you are innocent until proved guilty. And more importantly, in a criminal court, that guiltiness has to be proved beyond all, I'll say it again, beyond all reasonable doubt. Let me say that one more time. Beyond all reasonable doubt. So the police have not said any countries involved in it. The police have not said any individuals are involved in it. So now we come to something else. Why would the Russians, so now we're talking about Russia, the country that exists now, carry out the first attack just before they were going to stage the World Cup? And now why would something happen inside the World Cup where, and this is the important factor, it has been very, very successful throughout the world. People have come around and said, hey, listen, this propaganda about Russia is bad. I'm going to go to Russia on my holidays. It's great. Even if we just look at England, and this is bigger than England, by the way. Even if we just look at England, people have been saying, oh, we were fools for not going. We listened to this government propaganda. That's people's words, not mine. We should go to Russia and go and watch our team in it. So why does this happen now? Why would any sensible people in any way, shape or means spoil the best publicity they've had for, I would say, probably about 10 years? By carrying out some action right now. And if it's a coincidence because it's cross-contamination, isn't it a strange coincidence? So you heard me mention the Ukraine before, a former part of the Soviet Union. For those who don't know, the Ukraine and Russia are in a conflict. Two parts of a former empire are now fighting each other for eastern Ukraine and previously the Crimea, which the Russians have annexed. Their argument being that 90% of people in the Crimea speak Russian and are Russians, and when it changed from being part of Russia to being part of the Ukraine, under the Soviet Union, it was just like moving, and I would accept that as such, just like moving a part of, let's say, Lancashire into Greater Manchester, because they were one country. So it fitted that system to move that over so it could be controlled by a particular regional part of a bigger country, which was the Soviet Union. So now it's the Ukraine. But a lot of people in it see themselves as Russians because they're now two different countries. So I could see how that could happen. But that's a different conflict. I just give you that backside news, the backstory, as they say. But what we do know is, very, very recently, a journalist who has written many, many stories about the Kremlin and is anti the Kremlin, for maybe good reason, I'm not coming into that discussion at all, was recently reported as being shot dead. And if you read the news or you watch the TV news or the radio news, you couldn't have missed it. And straight away, people in this country, in fact, our foreign secretary stood up and blamed Russia for killing this journalist. Well, you know what? He wasn't dead at all. And the next day he came and stood up, and it was the Ukrainians who pretended he was dead to pretend that the Russians had killed him, so therefore he could speak to the world. So the Ukrainians did what we call in the intelligence community a false flag operation to fool everybody in the world to start talking about the Ukraine. So we already know the Ukrainians aren't against carrying out false flag operations. I just put that to you. Because who would have a better reason for raining on Russia's parade at the moment of Russia's greatest success in recent years? But the news media, knowing this happened to them in the Ukraine, knowing they were lied to in the Ukraine, knowing all of this took place, have not once suggested this might be the reason for what's happened right now. And it would appear that journalists aren't even investigating that. Because, and I bring it full circle now, because of what Denzel Washington said, all that matters is you get it out first. Okay, this is your friendly neighbourhood ex-spook, signing out. If you like what I've said, if you don't like what I've said, subscribe below. Press that subscribe button. Come back to me. Comment to me. Tell me why you think I'm speaking a lot of rubbish. Or if not, come back to me and ask me a little bit more about what goes on. This is your vlog, your YouTube channel. I want you to ask me questions. I want you to understand what happens in the world of secret intelligence and national security. I want you to be armed, if you will, with the knowledge of what this world is like. Obviously, as a patriot, I'm not going to say anything that undermines the United Kingdom, but I just want you to think and have free thought to understand how things function. As I said, that's it for today. Come back to me, subscribe, let's have a discussion. All the best.